My fiancé said my disabled brother was an embarrassment and banned him from our wedding. I replied, "Thanks for the truth." Then I took the ring off her finger and canceled the wedding. She was left frantically apologizing after realizing her cruelty cost her everything. I, 29M, thought I had found my person. My fiancé and I had been together for 3 years, and everything seemed perfect on the surface. She was successful, beautiful, and came from the kind of family that never had to worry about money. I should have seen the warning signs earlier, but love has a way of making you blind to the things that matter most. My younger brother has cerebral palsy. He's 25, brilliant, and one of the funniest people I know. He works part-time at a local library and volunteers with kids who have similar disabilities. Growing up, it was just the two of us after our parents died in a car accident when I was 19. I became his guardian, his advocate, and his biggest supporter. He became mine too, in ways that people without disabled siblings might not understand. My fiancée knew all of this from the beginning. She met my brother on our second date when he unexpectedly showed up at my apartment with takeout, insisting we needed to have a proper movie night. She smiled, shook his hand, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him. I remember feeling so grateful that the woman I was falling for could see past his disability to the amazing person underneath. Over the months that followed, she joined us for family dinners, birthday celebrations, and holiday traditions. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his volunteer work, and even helped him set up his new computer when his old one crashed. I thought she genuinely cared about him. I was wrong. The wedding planning started 8 months ago. We had decided on a medium-sized ceremony with about 60 guests, mostly family and close friends. My brother was going to be my best man, something I had known since I was a teenager. When other kids talked about their wedding fantasies, I always knew he would be standing beside me on the most important day of my life. Everything changed 3 weeks before the wedding. My fiancé had been increasingly stressed about the final details, obsessing over flower arrangements and seating charts. I attributed it to normal pre-wedding jitters. Then she asked to meet me for lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown, saying she needed to discuss something important about the ceremony. She arrived looking polished as always, but there was something different in her expression, something cold that I had never seen before. She ordered her usual salad and waited until the server left before dropping the bomb that would change everything. She told me she had been thinking about the wedding photos and how they would look in her family's social circles. She mentioned that her father's business associates would be attending, along with several prominent families from her mother's charity boards. Then she said the words that made my blood run cold. She said my brother was an embarrassment and that having him in the wedding party would reflect poorly on both of us. She suggested that maybe he could attend as a regular guest instead, sitting somewhere in the back where he would be less noticeable. She used words like unfortunate situation and social perception, as if my brother was some kind of problem to be managed rather than a human being I loved. I sat there in complete shock, unable to process what I was hearing. This was the woman I was supposed to marry in 3 weeks, the person I thought I would spend my life with. I asked her if she was serious, if she really meant what she was saying. She doubled down, explaining that she had talked to her mother about it, and they both agreed it would be better for everyone involved. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't just about wedding photos or social appearances. This was about the fundamental values that define who we are as people. My brother had overcome more challenges by age 10 than she had faced in her entire privileged life, and she saw him as something to be hidden away. I told her that my brother would be my best man as planned, and if she had a problem with that, maybe we needed to reconsider the entire relationship. She laughed, actually laughed, and said I was being dramatic. She insisted that once I thought about it logically, I would understand her position. She said she was trying to protect our future together, and that sometimes love means making difficult compromises. That word, compromise, hit me like a physical blow. A compromise would have been choosing a different venue or changing the color scheme. This was asking me to reject the most important person in my life because he didn't fit her image of perfection. I looked at this woman sitting across from me, perfectly composed and utterly convinced she was being reasonable. I realized that I had never truly known her at all. The person I thought I loved was a carefully constructed facade, and underneath was someone capable of breathtaking cruelty disguised as practicality. I thanked her for showing me who she really was. The confusion in her eyes was immediate and complete. She asked what I meant, and I told her that she had just saved us both from making the biggest mistake of our lives. I reached across the table, took her left hand, and gently removed the engagement ring I had saved for 6 months to buy. The transformation in her face was instantaneous. The composed mask cracked, and for the first time, I saw a genuine panic in her expression. She started backtracking immediately, saying she didn't mean it the way it sounded, that she was just stressed about the wedding and not thinking clearly. She grabbed my wrist as I stood to leave, insisting we could work this out. I told her there was nothing to work out. Anyone who could look at my brother and see an embarrassment was not someone I could spend my life with. Anyone who thought love meant hiding away the people who matter most was not someone I wanted to love me back. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and damage control. I called the venue first, then the caterer, the photographer, and the band. Most were understanding, especially when I explained that it was a family emergency. Some vendors kept deposits, others didn't. But the financial hit was nothing compared to the relief I felt. My brother was at the library when I called him. I asked if he could come home early because I needed to talk to him about something important. The concern in his voice was immediate, and I realized how this conversation could go very wrong very quickly. The last thing I wanted was for him to blame himself for the wedding being called off. When he got home, I sat him down and explained what had happened as gently as I could. I told him about my fiancée's request and my decision to end the engagement. I watched his face cycle through confusion, hurt, and then something that looked almost like relief. He said he had never felt completely comfortable around her, though he couldn't put his finger on why. He mentioned small moments that had bothered him, looks that lasted a fraction too long, conversations that died when he entered the room. He said he had convinced himself he was being paranoid, but apparently his instincts had been right all along. The guilt I felt in that moment was overwhelming. My brother had been protecting me by staying quiet about his concerns, just like I thought I had been protecting him by not seeing the truth about my fiancée. We both apologized, and then we ordered pizza and spent the evening planning a vacation instead of a wedding. Update 1. The fallout from canceling the wedding was swift and dramatic. My fiancée called me 17 times in the first 2 days, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that oscillated between tearful apologies and angry accusations. She showed up at my apartment twice, both times demanding that we talk things through like adults. During her second visit, she brought her mother, thinking perhaps that family intervention would change my mind. Her mother was a piece of work, suggesting that I was throwing away a wonderful woman over something trivial. She used phrases like special needs sensitivity and realistic expectations, as if my brother's humanity was up for negotiation. I told them both that there was nothing trivial about rejecting someone you love because they don't meet arbitrary standards of normalcy. I explained that my brother wasn't a problem to be solved or managed. He was family, and anyone who couldn't accept that had no place in my life. My ex-fiancée tried a different approach after her mother left. She suggested counseling, compromise, even postponing the wedding until we could work things out. She promised she would try harder to understand my perspective and build a better relationship with my brother. She said the stress of wedding planning had brought out the worst in her, and that wasn't who she really was. I told her that crisis reveals character, it doesn't create it. The person who could look at my brother and see an embarrassment was exactly who she really was. The woman I thought I loved had been an illusion, carefully maintained until the pressure of real life exposed the truth underneath. The hardest part was dealing with mutual friends who didn't understand the situation. Several people tried to mediate, suggesting that maybe we could find a middle ground. They pointed out how much we had invested in the relationship, how good we looked together, how rare it was to find someone you connected with on so many levels. But connection based on hiding fundamental parts of yourself isn't real connection at all. It's performance, and I was exhausted from performing the role of someone whose family was acceptable only when convenient. Update 2. 3 weeks after the canceled wedding, my brother and I took that vacation we had planned. We spent 10 days in Colorado, hiking trails that were accessible for his wheelchair and discovering breweries that served the kind of food we could never afford when I was putting every spare dollar toward wedding expenses. On the 4th day of our trip, while we were watching the sunset from a scenic overlook, my brother thanked me for choosing him over her. The simple gratitude in his voice broke something open in my chest that I didn't even know was closed. I told him that there was never a choice involved. He was my brother, my family, my responsibility, and my privilege. Anyone who couldn't see his worth was someone who couldn't see mine either, because we came as a package deal. We always had, and we always would. That same week, I heard through friends that my ex-fiancée was struggling with the aftermath of our breakup. She had apparently taken time off work and was seeing a therapist, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part remained convinced that I had dodged a bullet that would have wounded us both for years to come. When we returned from Colorado, I found a letter in my mailbox from her. It was 6 pages long, handwritten, and surprisingly honest about her upbringing and the pressures she felt to maintain appearances in her social circle. She acknowledged that she had been wrong about my brother and admitted that her request had been cruel and unfair. She wrote about growing up in a family where image was everything, where success was measured by how things looked rather than how they felt. She said she had never learned to value substance over style, authenticity over acceptance. She apologized not just for what she had said, but for who she had been throughout our entire relationship. The letter was well written and seemed genuine, but it also confirmed everything I had suspected about our fundamental incompatibility. She had been trying to fit me into a life that required my brother to be invisible, and that was never going to work for either of us. I didn't respond to the letter, but I kept it. Not because I was reconsidering my decision, but because it helped me understand how we had gotten so far down the wrong path. She had been performing a version of herself that she thought I wanted, while I had been performing a version of myself that I thought she needed. Update 3. 6 months later, I ran into my ex-fiancée at a coffee shop near my office. She looked different somehow, more relaxed but also more uncertain. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes before she asked if we could sit down and talk properly. She told me she had been in therapy since our breakup, working through the attitudes and assumptions she had inherited from her family. She said she understood now why I had ended things, and that she didn't blame me for my decision. She even asked about my brother, genuinely seeming to want to know how he was doing. I told her he was thriving. He had gotten a promotion at the library and was dating someone he met through his volunteer work. She was a teacher at a school for children with disabilities, and she thought my brother was amazing exactly as he was. They were planning to move in together, and I had never seen him happier. My ex-fiancée smiled when I told her this, and for the first time since I had known her, the expression seemed completely genuine. She said she was glad he had found someone who appreciated him, and that she was sorry it had taken losing me for her to understand what that meant. We talked for another hour about our lives since the breakup. She was dating someone new, a man who worked in social services and had very different values from her family. She said she was learning to prioritize character over credentials, substance over status. She hoped someday to have the kind of relationship with her future in-laws that I had with my brother. When we parted ways, there was no animosity left between us. We had both learned difficult lessons about authenticity, acceptance, and what it really means to love someone. She had lost a fiancé, but gained self-awareness. I had lost a partner, but kept my integrity and my family intact. Looking back, I realized that the woman who asked me to hide my brother was doing exactly what her family had taught her to do when faced with anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. The woman who apologized 6 months later was someone who had finally started to question those teachings. I still think I made the right choice. Love shouldn't require anyone to hide the people who matter most to them. Family isn't something you manage or minimize for the comfort of others. And anyone who thinks it is probably isn't ready for the kind of marriage that lasts through real challenges and genuine hardship. My brother walked me down the aisle 2 years later when I married someone who had asked to meet him on our first date. She said she wanted to know the person who had shaped me into the man I was, because anyone that important to me was automatically important to her. That's what real love looks like. It doesn't ask you to choose between the people you care about. It expands to include them all.